righty. So for our final keynote, I'm excited on this one. We've talked a lot this week about what transformation looks like in retail and consumer environments. But what happens when you apply those same principles to a highly regulated industry like healthcare? Bausch Lomb is doing exactly that, and it's a space where scale, speed, and regulation all collide. And yet they're proving that composable commerce has a powerful role to play to help them achieve their goals. So if you can please join me in welcoming Bausch Lomb's Executive Director of Enterprise Marketing and Customer Service, Dan Gates, to the Elevate stage. Thank you. All right, let's bring it home, shall we?
All right.
Great. So, thrilled to have you here today, and thanks again for joining me.
Yeah.
But before we dive in, can you just introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about your role?
Yeah, my name is Dan Gates. I'm the Executive Director of Enterprise Marketing at Bausch Lomb. And it's funny, before I came out here, I was like, oh, well, Bausch Lomb was built, developed in 1853, which is pretty impressive until you hear from Liverpool, and they're 5 years older than we are. So that's pretty impressive. But in nearly 200 years, Bausch Lomb has transformed to a global eye health company. We operate globally and have 4 divisions: surgical division, a pharmaceutical division. We also have over-the-counter as well as vision care, which is the contact lenses, and that's the part of the business that I represent. So within my role at Bausch Lomb, I'm responsible for our customer marketing team, so I drive pricing and promotion and rebates to our patients. We also are responsible for the private label store brands. We have a couple with some major retailers. And then the customer service reports into me. And lastly is the digital e-commerce platform that we're going to hear about today.
Awesome. Great. Could you maybe start off also by telling us a little bit about the ECP landscape and how Bausch Lomb fits into that and what makes you different from others in the space?
Yeah, optometry is an interesting space. There's 40,000 optometrists in the United States, and they practice in a range of settings. If anyone has eye care, you've probably all been to a different type of practice. So you think about independent optometry. There's also private equity has become a lot bigger within optometry. You have regional optometry and then corporate optometry. And the way that the doctors are compensated varies across these greatly. The independent practitioner has the ability to make money on not only the exam, but also the optical sales, so the glasses and frames in the front office, as well as contact lenses. You shift that all the way to corporate optometry. Typically, they're employed doctors that make money just on the exam itself. Now, there's 4 major players within contact lenses. Bausch Lomb is one of them: Johnson & Johnson, CooperVision, and Alcon. Bausch Lomb represents about 15% of the market, and we are 4 out of 4, so that's not great, right? But that means we have a lot of opportunity for growth. And just as recently as Q1, we were up 18% in our contact lens business, so we're doing extremely well. Opal played a role in that, which you'll hear about. But we know we can play a little bit differently than our competition. We're a little more nimble. Despite being a nearly 200-year-old company, we're pretty lean and mean, and we're able to make some quick decisions.
Now, you mentioned Opal, and we've talked quite a bit about that already, you and I, but maybe you can share with the audience here, what is Opal and why did you introduce it?
Yeah, Opal is a B2B2C platform at its core. So what Opal does is allow patients to purchase contact lenses directly from their optometrist 24 hours a day. Said another way, it's a way for an independent optometrist to sell contact lenses to their patients 24 hours a day. We had 3 core principles when we were looking to introduce Opal to the market. So as we were developing from a branding point of view, we knew the product had to be authoritative, it needed to be transparent, and it needed to be memorable. And so as far as authoritative, I mean, we are an extension of the eye care practitioner because they are the ones that are utilizing Opal and we are offering it to them. So what happens is the doctor signs up for Opal as a platform and agrees to be part of Opal. And then when a patient comes in and is fit into a Bausch Lomb contact lens, that patient is then introduced to Opal from the practice. So the practice creates that first connection to the patient. And so we become an extension of the practice with Opal. And so that authoritative nature, think banking, think anywhere that you know it needs to be secure and safe, we wanted to make sure we exuded that. In terms of transparent, contact lenses come with a little bit of skepticism from patients as it relates to the pricing in the practice. I mentioned there's different ways that doctors can make money on within their practice. Selling contact lenses is one of them. And so there's this inherent, maybe, distrust is probably too strong a word, but skepticism, where a patient is thinking, what am I really getting here? You wrote me this prescription, and now you're going to sell me the prescription, the product that you just wrote this prescription for, as opposed to in your general health care, you go to the Walgreens or CVS to fill that, right? So the transparency needed to be to show to the patient exactly what they're paying and the cost breakdown after insurance, after any rebates that the manufacturer might offer, and any in-office or practice discounts that are there. And then memorable, I'm a marketer, it pains me to say this, but contact lenses are a low engagement category. It's not something that people are thinking about all of the time, right? People typically think about contact lenses twice. It's when they're either bothering them or when they run out. And so we need to be memorable because we may only have one opportunity with that patient in a year between their exam cycle. And so when they come back to needing more contact lenses, certainly they could think of the online retailers out there in the universe, but we would rather them think of Opal and their eye care provider, and so that's what we wanted to institute with Opal.
And were there market changes happening that really drove the reason for you all to develop this? Like, what was the driving force behind why you needed to make this change?
Yeah, I've been in contact lenses for 20 years, and forever there's been two challenges to the doctor the entire time that I've been doing this, and it's only gotten more and more difficult. The number one thing that doctors say is a pain point is competition from online retailers. Number two is staffing. Okay, so when we were looking to develop Opal, I was extremely excited because this finally could address that number one challenge that I just talked about, competition from online retailers. Within contact lenses, 50% of patients purchase their contact lenses online, which in a vacuum is fine. But when you're in the mind of the eye care provider, that means 50% of your patients are choosing to buy their product from somebody else. And so Opal was implemented to address this. So when you think about if 50% of the patients are going online, what happens when they do that? The first thing is the patient thinks they're getting a better price when they go to an online retailer outside of the practice. But the reality is, in most cases, after I talked about the insurance and the manufacturer's benefits, it's oftentimes less expensive to purchase from the doctor. The doctor just doesn't do a great job of communicating that to the patient. The other thing that happens is the doctor doesn't get the sale. Well, okay, the doctor doesn't get the sale. We know that. What's the cascading effect of that? And that is we offer manufacturer incentives for volume. Right? The more volume you do in terms of contact lenses as a practice, the better pricing you get, or growth rewards that you might get. Well, if half of your business is going somewhere else, you're not going to get those rewards. And so the other part of this is compliance. Patients should have an annual eye exam. I hope everybody in this audience does that. But the online retailers, certainly not all of them, but some of them, they're interested in selling the widget, and not interested in the exam. In fact, the exam is disruptive because once the exam expires, they can no longer sell the contact lens. So in the 11th month, they reach out to patients and say, hey, you might be running out of contact lenses. Skip your exam, just order more now and get your second year supply. And so that takes the patient out of the market. Now the doctor lost 2 annual supplies and an exam with that. Right? And then the last part is data. Doctors tend to be very concerned about their data, and rightfully so. And whenever we talk about a platform like this, typically we hear, well, I don't want manufacturing to have a back door to my data, and I can understand that. But when 50% of your patients are purchasing elsewhere, they're handing your data over to those third parties, and they're going to handle that data much more irresponsibly than Bausch Lomb would.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great point. So when you were designing the system, when you were designing Opal, did you set key metrics for success ahead of time?
Yeah.
And if so, what were they and what results have you seen?
We did. Because, as you've heard me say, now while this is a B2B2C, we really went from the inside out, meaning from the professional out to the consumer. So our key metric at first was to get doctor enrollments, because that was going to be the first way for any patients to even be introduced is from the doctor. As I mentioned, there's 40,000 optometrists in the US. There's about 18,000 that practice in an independent fashion that would be eligible for a product like Opal. And so we had a goal of about 2,000. We've already exceeded that goal in terms of enrollments, and by the end of this year, we hope to have over 4,000 doctors enrolled, so close to a quarter of the eligible offices. But what really surprised us was the amount of orders we were getting. We didn't know if practices would put all of their Bausch Lomb orders through this or just a handful. As it turns out, they're putting them all. In fact, in the first 3 months of launch, we launched this in October of 24, so by the end of 2024, 3 months in, we thought we'd have 2,100 orders in. We had over 11,000 orders in. And by now, we've got over 60,000 orders just a few short months later. So it's done extremely well, and it's exceeded. We have to keep recalibrating our expectations.
Those are amazing results.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, in addition to the results and the design and all of that, what has been the impact on the end user experience, on the end customer experience?
Yeah, the way I look at this is there's an end user, which is the patient for sure. That's the patient that's ultimately going to end up with a contact lens. But there's really 4 key stakeholders along that path. The first one is our sales representative. The second one's the doctor. The third is the staff at the practice. And then lastly is the patient. So while they are the end user in terms of the contact lens, all 4 of the stakeholders that I just mentioned are critically important. The sales reps love it because just like the doctor, if the doctor doesn't make the sale of contact lenses in their office, the sales rep doesn't get credit for that sale either. So half of their sales are going somewhere else. So they're thrilled about Opal. The doctors, we had a small practice in the Pacific Northwest that was relatively new, a small practice. When you have a small independent optometrist, usually the doctor's doing it all. They might have one staff member that can help with some administrative things, but the doc kind of does it all. And she wrote our sales rep a note that said, "Opal changed my life," because we were able to capture patients and let her sell those contact lenses to the patients that were normally going to walk out the door. And so she was thrilled. We know the staff loves it because we hear all the time, our sales reps are constantly talking with the staff members. We get great feedback. And if they didn't like it, they'd stop using it. We have great activation, which means the way we measure activation is if they're using it on a regular basis, and we're seeing that consistently. And it's really that comes down to the staff. And then obviously the patients, we don't talk to the patients. We haven't necessarily heard from them, but we know it's working because in the short time that we've had the ability to retarget some patients that purchase smaller supplies, they're coming back to purchase more.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's great. Now, I'd imagine that this new digital commerce channel is giving you a ton of data that you previously would have lost when the transactions were solely between the ECP and the customer.
Absolutely.
So how are you using this to inform strategies going forward?
It's mind-boggling as a rep, as a marketer, because prior to Opal, first and foremost, we do mostly professional advertising because for 2 reasons. It's very expensive to go to the consumer because you're competing in the overall world, not just within contact lenses. But the other part is we had no visibility to what their behaviors were. I just talked about they're maybe in the market once a year for a contact lens. So you put out a digital advertisement, and the best reaction we would typically get is on a free trial. So if you put a free trial for Bausch Lomb infused contact lenses, click here to download your certificate. That's the last time we get to see that patient. We don't know from there what happens. So let's say by some miracle they download the certificate, then they make an appointment, then they go to the practice, then they ask the doctor to be fitted to infuse, and the doctor isn't that big a fan of Bausch Lomb and says, you know what, I'm going to put you into a Johnson & Johnson lens, and now the whole cycle broke. We now have visibility to the entire journey of the patient from the time they get their exam all the way through the purchase and repurchase, and we'll be able to track that over time.
Wow. So as marketers, right, we are very data-driven, so I can see how that's exciting.
Yeah.
But looking a little bit more broadly, how has that data from the platform enabled you to do your job as a marketer more effectively?
Yeah, this part's been good. I mean, when we have the having the data just completely changes our ability to go to market. So when we're able to speak to the doctor and say, this is happening at your practice, this is happening with your patients, and being able to retarget to those patients and say, time to repurchase, and prove to the doctor what we said in the beginning was going to happen, is happening, that makes all the difference.
Very cool. Yeah. So again, as marketers, I love having a marketer on stage with me. This is fun. I know there's always risk involved whenever we open up a new channel, right? You never know how it's going to go, like you said.
Yep.
Fortunately for you, your results were fantastic. It went the best way possible. But when developing Opal, how did you weigh the risks and rewards? How did you balance that out, understanding that there are always some risks there?
Yep.
And how did that influence your roadmap for opening up potentially new channels in the future?
Yeah, I think first was identifying what the risks were in the first place, and we did a lot of market research ahead of time with doctors, with patients, to understand what the needs were. And optometrists do have apprehensions, as I mentioned already, with industry getting involved in things like this. So we knew we needed to keep the doctor at the center of the experience all the way through. And so how we did that was, as patients get an email, for example, about a repurchase, it's not necessarily coming from Opal, though it's branded Opal. It's also coming from that practitioner. So we include the practitioner's name on there to make sure that the patient and the doctor sees that we're not trying to get the doctor out of the picture, but rather reinforce the importance of the doctor. So there was some risk there where we didn't know if the doctors would believe us or would maybe be hands-off on that. But thankfully, they do now, and they can tell that we're not necessarily trying to ace them out of the picture. And, you know, I think in terms of patient, I guess I'm sorry, I lost my track of thought there.
That's okay.
Yeah, we can go on to the next one.
Yeah, happy to. So I guess just, as we kind of move towards the end here, any key learnings that you want to share with everyone, anything that you, learned along the way through designing and launching this new system?
Yeah, if I was to do something different, it would be, I'll back up just to say, when we launched Opal, again, back to we didn't really know what the risk and rewards, what was going to happen with the doctors embracing it or not. So we wanted to have a low barrier of entry. And so I'll give an example. Stripe is a partner that we use here where the doctor, of course, can use their own POS system in their office if they're taking the transaction. But when the patient wants to repurchase, that would go through Stripe. We didn't make signing up for Stripe a mandatory requirement within the platform when we started rolling it out. And in retrospect, I wish we had, because now when we retarget patients, we have about 6,000 patients out there that have agreed to marketing consent, that want to be spoken to, that want to repurchase, but they're going to have to call their doctor to place an order because they can't place an order through Stripe, right, through the platform. So we're correcting that, and we've made corrections with the reps, and the reps are taking care of this retroactively, but we have to go back to 2,000 offices, and it's not quite 2,000. About half of them did the Stripe, and half of them didn't. And I think we just didn't do a good enough job of explaining the benefits of why they should do it. And so we're doing that now, and moving forward, it should be fine. And we've been able to close the gap, but that was a key learning for sure.
That's great. So final question for you here. Anything that we didn't cover, anything else that you think is great? It's such a great story. I'm sure we could go on forever, but any other critical aspects to the story that you think?
No, I'd just say thank you to the broader team. We're lean at Bausch Lomb. We're a large company, but my marketing group is relatively small. We rely heavily on our agency partners, for example, for our creative and for our advertising that we do, but also with this team and making sure having the same people on the calls every single time that we meet and huddle and brainstorm has been really rewarding as a marketer, because you know they're dedicated to it and they're behind it all the way, and it just makes you feel comfortable that when the camera's off and the Zoom call is over, that the work is still being done by the team.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, it's a fantastic story. Thank you for being here with us today. And I think it really talks to the power of how you take those risks, and it paid off more than you even expected.
Yeah, it's been great.
So thanks
Thank
again.
you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan.
Appreciate it.